Hello, everyone. Welcome to VNTANA Live. I am Ben Conway, the co-founder and COO of VNTANA. And with me, I've got Sergey from VNTANA. Sergey is the CEO and co-founder of VNTANA. Sergey is a former software engineer at Google who founded VNTANA about 5 years ago and has recently been acquired by Farfetch. So, Sergey, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. My pleasure.
So today we're going to be talking about virtual try-on. We just want to get into the weeds some more here. What's happening in the space today? Where is it going? What's real? What's not real? Always a good question to be asking in this, especially this virtual age when there's a lot of videos and information posted on LinkedIn and other places that looks real, but whether or not it's actually a scalable solution that's deployed in the marketplace is a totally different matter. So let's jump right into
absolutely.
it. So Sergey, virtual try-on's been around for a few years now. We've seen it. First, we saw it in footwear. We're starting to see it in places like jewelry and now apparel, which we're going to set aside because I want to get into that a little bit more deeply separately. But where do you think we're going? Like, what do you think is going to be the next thing we're going to see in 2023 with virtual try-on?
Well, historically, I would say that probably we started with makeup, and I mean, like overall with the body. It was even when we were starting VNTANA, we thought that makeup and face tracking was already mature, which I now understand it wasn't, but still, like it was already a thing. And there was Modiface, and there was acquisition by L'Oreal back then. So try-on is something which with us maybe for 7 years or so, at least, even if not more. Well, I think, yes, like, so we had footwear, we have some jewelry, apparel, a lot of people, including us, investing in post-try-on. I think my gut feeling is that we currently in the market, which is like growing, and the adoption is growing, and then like the real use cases, and as you mentioned, the challenge is how do we bring, thousands of assets into it. So I think this is where we're currently in the like early scaling phase with more and more brands and retailers coming there and more verticals there. Maybe in a couple of years we will see like some virtual try-on where you can try on several things together, like mix and match try-on. This would be cool, but I think we are still several years from that.
Yeah. So there's a couple things I wanted to comment on there. So first, I completely empathize with your feeling of, hey, we thought this market's fairly mature. we're gonna go in and disrupt it. And little do you realize that you're actually building the market for the first time. That what you've seen is, founders sometimes, I think, have this idea that it's like, oh, this is where it's going. It's moving super fast. And then you kind of get into it. And especially when you're in fashion, there's customers that we're closing now that we talked to 3 years ago. And when I had the first conversation, I was like, this is perfect. They're going to be a perfect fit. This totally makes sense. And here we are 3 years later, finally getting a deal done. So I completely resonate with that. And the other thing that I wanted to jump on there that has been kind of a theme of some of these conversations is, I think that we're in a plate, like people keep asking the question of like, what's going to be coming next? Like I just asked you the question of like, what do you see coming down the pipe? And I think what 2023 is going to be all about is scale for the customers that have actually finding value. And I'd actually love to hear a little bit more about the value that people are deriving from virtual try-on and why customers are continuing to buy from you. But so much of what we've seen in the market in a number of different like 3D virtual applications have been things that have been done like specifically for that purpose. So they've scanned a new set of shoes specifically for that purpose. They've had an agency build an experience for Balenciaga or something else like that for the metaverse specifically for that purpose. Where scale is going to come is when they're like taking the assets they're already building and running them through pipelines so they're able to be used, thousands of assets, and there's not another cost incurred at every single time they need to remake the asset for use somewhere else. Like so much of what we're seeing of people doing has been dozens or maybe hundreds, but like there's not a lot of customers doing really anything virtually in the thousands yet. So I think it's not the answer that everyone wants. Everyone wants to hear more like, I don't know, we're DALL-E 2 is going to be doing all sorts of new things that are going to help us try on, and AI is going to take over and it's going to be incredible. But I think the reality is we're going to be doing a lot of just hard work over 2023.
Yeah, totally. It's not something which will make the news, right? So it's not something which you will read in Business and Fashion on the cover, but this is like where the money is and where the value is actually.
Yeah, 100%. So let's talk about that for a minute. That we talked about like the value proposition. So what are customers seeing? Like who implement virtual try-on? Like is it different metrics for different customers? Or some customers looking for engagement? Or some customers looking for lower returns? Like, is that KPI different for different customers?
Well, this is a very good question. And it is good because the answers actually really depends on the particular customer, particular use case, and particular situation. And even I think with the time passing, right, the reason why companies bought this solution 2 years ago is different from what they are doing right now. Like speaking about the value, I think there are again several selling points, and I think the what is the most critical is actually why customers love it. It's not like why brands buy it, because brands buy it because customers love it. And the reason why customers love it is actually try on, and I mean like overall 3D experiences, but try on in particular is probably the only way how you can make this like interaction truly personal in online, right? So because when you go to the store, you can take the shoe from the shelf and see it, rotate it, bend it.
Right.
You can try it on your feet, and it's very three-dimensional, very volumetric, very like interactive in offline. And online, when you have a phone, which is like not very large usually, right? It's a big challenge. What you usually have just like 2D images there, and it's just a different level of experiences. Because what we see from like our user testing and from talking to users is that people are like they start considering even the items which we didn't want to buy because they tried it in try-on. They see, oh wow, oh this is how it works, this is how it looks, oh cool. So I mean, like this ability to provide in just on simple mobile phone to provide this really interactive experiences is what customers love. And this is great for brands because brands also want to present their things differently. They just like everybody's not like sick of, but I mean, if you look into the 2D imagery, just like plain images, they're with us since I think 1950s or so when the first printed catalogs appeared, and it's like completely different from offline. So this is, I think, this is the main value is just new level of merchandising online. Like this is how we present. This is critical. And so if you say about like the metrics, it's also really depends on brands. Usually why customers buy our solution is because they want to be like they want to showcase it online, the product, which I previously told, and they also want to appeal to the new young audience, Gen Z, millennials, the new pockets. Some like everybody is talking that these people who are born after 2000 are inherently increasing their spending on fashion market. It's new pocket wallets you have to. It's new wallets you have to take. So yeah, we see like we have a lot of data from several customers confirming that this is a conversion rate uplift with try-on, but this is like usually not the critical selling point. This is something which people ask, and this is but this is not like the only reason why they buy. Nobody buying it just because it increases conversion. Mostly people buy it because this is a new level of experience. So this is like 21st century. This is what the new audience wants.
So that's super interesting, and that's you bring up something that I think is important, which is the paradigm that they're looking through for these purchases. They're trying to pigeonhole some of these new experiential technologies into the same categories that they make all of their other decisions about e-commerce or customer interactions, where that same brand might have a presence at the US Open. Maybe they've got a booth at the US Open and they're doing an experience there. Maybe they've got a booth at some other conference that's appearing, to VidCon or something like that in Los Angeles with a much younger demographic, and they're trying to do something around that to engage with those brands. And the way they measure those is very different than the way they measure the placement of an icon or a click to purchase button on their e-com site. And it sounds like what you're saying is like they need to be integrating some of that thinking in the way they approach these digital experiences. They need to think about them similarly to how they do with physical experiences, which is it's part of a holistic marketing strategy rather than just like, oh, you implement this and then immediately you're going to see a 40% increase in conversion, which I think overall we're seeing that across like 3D too, right? Shopify a couple of years ago came out with all these crazy stats of like reducing returns, doubling conversion rates. And if you go to really, I mean, you can look at stats that we've got case studies from our customers. You can look at competitors. Everyone's trying to put out some numbers there, and everyone's asking for numbers of like, you know, what is this going to do for me? And the answer is probably it depends. Who's your customer base, right? Like who buys it? Like, are they going to participate with this? What's the experience like? Where are you interacting with it? Like we've had customers that have like, oh, we implemented 3D and you know it didn't affect conversion rate, and then we're like, can you show us where the 3D was? And they're like, it's the 6th carousel image. And you're like, okay, well, that could have something to do with it. So there's a lot of questions there. So I really like this idea of this is part of a bigger strategy. It's not just, you know, 1 or 2 metrics that you're looking at.
Totally. Yeah. So there is like one not silver bullet metric here, and it's a different, more strategic decision.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think helpful because we get customers asking about that all the time of like, what is that metric? Like, why should I be? And specifically on virtual try-on, even though it's not something that we offer, we partner with people like you, but they ask for those metrics. So I really like your point of view there. So what would you say is like the thing that's frustrating you the most about the industry right now? Like what is it that is appearing on your LinkedIn feed of someone that you follow or someone that you subscribe to, and you're like, oh, not another one of those? Or maybe it's just like interactions or conversations you have with customers. Like, what's the top of your list?
So speaking of LinkedIn, I think what the most frustrating thing was like all the NFT stuff. Thanks God, currently it's dropped. And like I'm happy we didn't get into it, though we were thinking should we do something on it.
I think everyone was. It was so loud, it was hard to ignore.
Yeah. I don't know. Like we were lucky there. Trying to focus on the commerce stuff. I think now, well, it's still with us with all these metaverse discussions, and I think people just don't really know what the metaverse is. Like nobody knows. It's just like some buzzword, just like saying everything which is 3D is a metaverse. We don't understand why, but it's just a good name for it. I mean, if we say about like what is on radars, if we go deeper into what's happening there, I think at least for us the most frustrating thing is that. So I mean, like probably before speaking about frustration, let's talk about what is good. And we see that 3D adoption really grows year over year significantly, and like a lot of brands, a lot of customers who come to us, they already have some assets and they're already like building it, investing into it, which is very different from comparing to 2019, for example. Right. But what really frustrates is that when people come with the assets and like they have, for example, great renderings. For example, take watches, right? So watches is like very expensive, and they want to make the photos as juicy as they can. And then customers come with these juicy photos and say like, we want to have like try on like this, and you And you say, okay, like, but the light here is like, it's not the real light. If I put these watches on your wrist in different lighting condition, it won't look like this. It's like, it just will be so unrealistic. And the other side to the same problem is that people coming with Essence, and they already have, I don't know, like million of polygons. It's a great rendering, but it's not ready for AR, right?
Yeah.
But they expect this to work. Okay, we already invested. We paid a lot of money to other guys who developed the model for us. Why can't we go with that?
Yeah.
So you still have to educate. You still have to educate, and this is like really educate customers, which is really frustrating.
Yeah, I'd say education is super critical. There's a lot to unpack there with the light. Like the other thing that people don't think about is like how much more, like the render that they're generating might take minutes on a very powerful computer to generate a single image. And the experience that you're delivering is going to be 30 images per second or 60 images per second on their wrist, that's involving tracking, that's only using the power of their mobile device, and in a web-based format too, not even an app. So now you've got it running in browser on it. So like it's orders of magnitude difficult to do that in a timely fashion versus getting something that's a render. The other thing that happens that people don't realize is that many renders that are set up are lighting conditions that may not even be possible to actually replicate in the real world. So a funny story is like, so we've done some stuff with jewelry, and we've built custom shaders for jewelry so that we can make gems look good in real time on the web. And we've had customers say, we need you to remove the fire from the gems because, that's not how Tiffany says it. That's not how these renderings look. And it's fine. We were able to adjust that. But I remember having conversations with the developers, and developers are going, but there is in the real world, this color exists in the real world. They tell me what the real world, and then I build it like this. And now this isn't the real world version of this. So it's just lighting in 3D. And that's not to say anything about either one. Customers want to give what their customers want, but it's just complex. It's really complex. There's a lot to understand. There's a lot to digest. And it's hard for people to understand the difficulty between a render and an actual interactive experience.
Yeah, that's true. And I think part of this underlying problem is that people who make the decision about whether we go with this VTO1 experiences are different people who we work with, right? So usually work with product teams, with maybe like commerce teams, right? And this decision is done in marketing, and they have like very strict guidelines, very clear vision of how they want it, and they don't want it to be realistic. They want to be sexy and juicy. So yeah, this is like the problem we'll have to face with and deal with, and to invent some creative solutions.
Yeah, I know. Education is there was a challenge in education just on the like digital product creation teams to start, because they were all moving from 2D workflows to 3D and then renders to real-time ready assets. But then you have to like start that journey all over again for the e-com team, for the marketing team, for the IT team. So there's finding a good way to disseminate that information across the organization, I think, is like super critical to good decision making. Otherwise, yeah, it's just a challenge for sure. So we talked about like the utility from virtual try-on, and your thought is that it's the fact that customers love it is driver enough for brands to like participate in this. So like, what are some like the best things that best reactions you've gotten for virtual try-on from your customers? Like what are some of your favorite moments as like, when we're founders kind of running these companies, it can be difficult and a bit of a grind, but then sometimes you get these experiences like I bought a tree for my living room the other day from a customer, and I used AR, and I realized that the customer was a customer of ours when I did it. And I got such a huge kick out of it, because I was like, yes, using the product in the real world. So if you've got any stories like that, I think people always like to hear them.
Well, I think one of the things which really impressed me is that when we were doing user research for like just trying to understand what is the key things for quality of experience. And so in user research, you essentially like have several services where you can have a panel of people, and you give them task to install the app, to try it on, and give some feedback. And usually this is what people do for money, like they value their time, right? So they usually like just go question by question, answer, and that's it. And then you can see the video of what they were doing and their reaction. This is essentially the goal of this job. And we had like multiple people who, when first trying shoes on, they just like lost for a minute or so. So they forget everything about the task they were doing. They just like, oh, you can do this. Oh, you can do like that. Oh, man, this is sick. And someone even calling some friends there.
Yeah.
So this is really mind blowing, and I think this is what really makes the product eye candy and sexy, and this is what brings the like selling power of it for brands. So I think this was the most like fulfilling moments. And I think when we first launched it, it was our own application. We had quite a good success, a lot of mentions in media, some video, etc., etc. So this was good. But I mean, if I only knew how was the long way after this, maybe I wouldn't be so joyful back then.
Yeah, but that's a good idea. I think maybe we should be putting together a highlight reel of like customer faces to this technology. I actually haven't seen a good ad for AR yet that's like just capturing reactions of the magic that that the technology can bring. So a question we got from the audience is about fit, about like sizing, and when are we gonna enter into an area where we're gonna be able to actually get fit right via virtual try on for apparel, for footwear. I've got a lot of thoughts on that, but would love to hear your take and kind of how you deal with this. I know this conversation has to come up with customers all the time of like, is this, I'm a size 12, is this going to be a real size 12 on my foot, et cetera, et cetera. But you give your take and then I'll talk about mine.
Sure. So I think this was number one popular question from customers, particularly in the early ages. Can you detect the size? And we were always saying, no, we cannot. And we were like seriously considering should we focus on it, and we decided not to focus on it. This is very hard. This is very hard task, very important, very challenging. So we're asking, answering the question about when. I don't know, maybe 5 more years or so at least. So it's not an easy, right? So you can do something, but I think the best solution I've heard for size recommendations is actually based on the previous purchases and like taking the information about the other shoes which work well for you and sending them. Like all other like very sophisticated solution about scanning your foot with 3D scanners and I never seen them like really getting the great adoption. Like I have some theories why. Maybe just like my main theory is the UX is not that great. It's not something you can use like online at all, and at all prone. So quite a skeptical about these being solved in these years with just scanning the feet with your camera.
So I would 100% agree with you on that topic. And something else that people don't realize is that oftentimes the virtual version, the digital version of let's just say footwear in this instance, may not actually be built the way that the shoe is actually going to be built. So I've talked to customers and they're basically said, like, we know that this won't work for true sizing, even though that's not really an option right now. That's not like a feature that anyone's offering. The model itself isn't set up to fit your foot, deform to your foot. There's so much complexity in that. So I agree that it's going to be a long time before we see anything like that. And the same is definitely true for apparel. Not to mention the fact that like you'd have to, number one, they're usually generating a single version of this. So like if a shirt comes in small, medium, large, whatever, there might be different tech packs that the manufacturer is going to get, but on the 3D version of it, they're not probably generating all of those derivatives. Then all those derivatives have to get stored. They all have to get optimized. They all have to get served. There's just like, it adds an enormous amount of complexity. So to your point, I think that we'll probably get better recommendations engines based on previous purchases. There's going to probably be more data that's going to, that brands are going to be able to put in about their products. And there'll probably be something that's going to do a better job of recommending some of that. And there might be some better scanning solutions where you can input your sizes, but I don't think we're going to reach a point anytime soon with any sort of try on, whether like where, let's say I'm trying on a pair of sneakers. I'm not going to be able to tell that that I need an 11 and a half instead of a 10 and a half, or an 11 and a half instead of a 12. I'm not going to put it on my foot and it's not going to show that it's too small. I mean, it's really challenging, and probably like you don't get any haptic feedback there. So it's really much better to almost skirt that issue entirely and figure out, does this look good? And then have something else make a recommendation for you. That's at least my personal opinion on that.
Yeah, totally. We talked with several companies who were developing scanning solution, even like with the front camera of your iPhone. And they learn that inherently, like there are so many that actually food when you walk is different from food when you just like put it on, even when you're sitting or putting on the knee of another feet. So it's for different people, it's different. So it's like, it's very, very complicated task. And speaking about having one model for all issues, and actually what we recommend to customers and what we do when we develop 3D assets for our own customers and Shoes Try-On is we pre-modify the sneakers, so making it like a little bit wider near the ankle. Yeah. So when it's try-on, it feels that it's already on the foot. Because like usually all the models which people produce and brands produce, they have like very tight comparing to how it feels on how it looks on the feet.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And that's like it's kind of a side note, but what we've spent a lot of time doing with customers recently has been looking holistically at like, what is their 3D roadmap going to look like? Where do they want to go? And things that are super simple like that. That's a perfect example of why it's important to get everyone on the same page, because if you make 1,000 sneakers, which customers are in 3D, and every single one of them, and you want to do virtual try on, but you don't take into account the fact that you're going to do virtual try on, the way you model those sneakers might require a rework before you can actually get virtual try on to look correct using those same assets. So that's a super important example, I think, of like by thinking through, and you could save yourself a lot of headache early on. So let's move on to apparel try on, because this is something that's coming up all the time. And I've got kind of like 2 questions for you. So would love to hear your thoughts generally about what's happening with virtual try-on for apparel. And then secondly, I want to talk more about some of the big players in tech. So like Amazon starting to offer virtual try-on. I'm sure Meta's working on stuff. Google's going to be working on stuff in their own way. Snap's doing things. Like, would love to hear your thoughts on like how they're going to factor into the space. Because one thing that I've heard recently is customers will be like, oh, we already have a virtual try-on partner, so we're not thinking about Amazon. We're not thinking about something else. And I don't know. I'm very interested to see how this all comes together. So let's start with apparel and then move to big tech.
So in apparel, I think this is the holy grail of virtual try-on. Let's be honest, this is fashion. This is really challenging, interesting, and I think the return will be high for the winners there. Like a lot of companies, startups investing into it. I think I know maybe at least 3 small startups, and also Snap is one of the guys who are actively investing into it. We also work on this, going to launch something next year. it's damn hard. I can tell you, it's much more harder comparing to shoes and watches. But eventually it will be there. I think it's going to be a big thing for retail and overall, like for e-commerce.
What are some of the things that make it more difficult than footwear for the people listening?
Yeah, I think two things. Like, so overall, the body is more like they come in more different shapes comparing to feet, for example, right? So people of different sizes, of different heights, of different genders, and like the body has more degrees of freedom, right? So you can like much more comparing to foot. So this is number one. And number two, which is actually related, is that the apparel itself is deformable, right? So with a shoe or watch, you can model it as a one rigid piece of 3D, and you can just adjust the position and render it on your body. And with apparel, you have to model how it evolves with your movement when you like move your arm on the top, etc., etc., etc. So you have to deform it on the fly and in real time. And even on top of the deformation, there is even like deeper level where you would love to model some physics, right? Because like how these small needs shake when I move, etc., etc., etc. And yes, you have to do it real time. It's still some challenge in this 30, like even 20 frames per second on mobile phone and sometimes in browser. So this is what makes it challenging.
Yeah, go ahead. Let's talk about it. I'm guessing you're going to move on to what some of the big players are doing.
Yeah. So on Amazon, I think this is actually brilliant news. I was like so happy to see it coming, because I don't think Amazon is going to share it with people outside. It's Amazon usually doesn't do it, right? And this is the great vetting from the leader in industry on this technology. So like overall the quality sucks for now. We'll see maybe in a couple of years where do they come to. But like the sign for the industry is like very clear. We believe into this. We invest into it. It brings value. On other big players, if you look into, I started today's conversation with makeup and the idea that we had it in 2018, and actually I think Google added the face tracking on Android, Apple added it into iOS. But I don't see a lot of makeup try-on companies out there. So usually what we see is, and if we look at it onto Meta and Google, they already do some like try-ons. At least when you can put something on your table, they're already doing this. But they do it particularly to grow their own businesses, which is mostly advertising. And this is their like primary focus. They want to bring more revenue, more advertising revenue to their own platform. In this sense, I think players like us, we are helping brands and businesses to build their own business and run on their own platforms like web and applications. And we go deeper into, how do we bring thousands of assets?
Yeah.
Google's and Meta's of this world, they just like don't want to push it. They want someone else to do this. So I think the advantage for companies like us there is that we can provide the tailored solutions for brands to grow their own business rather than doing it Meta. But I think, as we discussed with you previously, because we have to educate customers, and they're doing a great job in it, right? Because they're just promoting it, they're just like bringing awareness of it, and as we discussed, it's essentially what limits currently the growth of our markets and our products there. So I think this is good for the industry.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with you. I think what we say all the time is that a rising tide floats all boats in this, where we're at right now. We're so early on the adoption curve that really anything that's pushing this forward is probably good for all of us. A mistake that we see people make is like really these categories that could be really big and really impactful to their business. Like virtual try-on is a perfect example. There's so many different ways. I mean, there's 2D virtual try-on of like overlaying images on top of you. There's 3D that's going to be more interactive, and there's accessories, apparel, footwear. There's all of these different ways that you could go about it. And people go, oh, we have a virtual try-on solution. Oh, we're already doing virtual try-on this way, so we're not going to consider over here. And it's really different customer journeys. Like on the 2D side of things, that consideration is made. They think about that customer journey and how are they arriving there. But on 3D, the thinking isn't like that. So it gets bucketed like we already have virtual try-on, we already have management, we already have whatever else it might be, without thinking more holistically about what does that look like? Like, are we going to want to have a try-on experience that's really tailored and branded the way that we want to do it and, you know, different and customizable? Or are we going to want to have something that's more generic? I just think that's like a really important point that you called out there, is just these topics are rich and there's a lot to kind of explore there. And so it's certainly not a checkbox. A lot of thought needs to go into what's the customer journey and how are we going to interact with our customers on these different channels. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, I would love to add something on 2D try-on because like it's the task is easier, right? So you just have an image and let's put something on top of it. And I'll be honest, at least when we were thinking about closed try-on, we were thinking, should we start with the 2D try-on? We did some user research and found out that, for example, people don't have, like a lot of people, maybe half of the people don't have photos of them within their phones, right? So even if I want to try something, I don't have the photos for that. Surprisingly, we thought that like maybe 80% do have, but not everybody posts on Instagram every other day their full body selfie. And surprising, and it lacks this interactivity. So I mean, it's just a different level of interpretation. I mean, like impression. Sorry. So this is why we decided, the task is harder, but you have to do into 3D interactive in AR. This is the only way how it's going to work and attract customers' attention.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I'm interested to see, there's people, you know, we might see more like, because like you said, 2D is easier and it'd probably be easier to generate derivatives. So different body types, different skin tones, things like that, being able to select someone who looks more like you. But at the end of the day, I think a lot of us really want to see us in the clothing or the shoes or whatever else is that we're wearing. And the answer to that is pretty much only interactive. All right. So going for almost about 40 minutes. I got one question. This has actually been coming up and has actually recently come up with some customers. So you come from outside the fashion world and now have been working deeply in fashion. I come outside of fashion world and now have also been working deeply in fashion. This shirt, I think, is my father's from like 20 years ago. And I'd like to say that it was vintage, but it's just a little bit festive for the holiday season. And so that's why I brought it out. So what would you say has been the most surprising thing for you about working in fashion? Kind of your expectations going into it and, you know, what day-to-day is like now?
Well, I'll be honest, I didn't have any expectations because like originally the inception of VNTANA and the idea was that we want to do cool stuff, right? And we believe in computer vision and AR. Let's do the cool stuff, right? Okay, we got some cool stuff running, but now we have to make a business out of it. And this is where fashion came into my world. So like I was looking for fashion. I was like mostly in love with tech and 3D and computer vision. And I think what actually was probably the most surprising for me, I think it took maybe 1 or maybe 2 years for me to understand, is what is the real essence of this fashion business. what are they like? How do they? What is the essence of the business? And how I explain it to myself is the business of fashion is actually in storytelling. So brands have at least particularly in luxury. In luxury, they are constantly telling stories which appeal to customers, and like with every I mean like quarter, with every season, they have to reinvent themselves to do the new stories. And I think this is actually why VTO has traction in luxury right now, because this is a really good way how to do this visual storytelling and online. And like I'm particularly not very good at storytelling, and this is not my the strongest thing. And this is why I probably couldn't understand that how fashion works. And this is mostly it. But apart from that, this is like normal people. They have business. They're doing business. They have some, I mean, reasoning. I think it's pretty normal in this sense. Just the business is different. It's not technology. It's storytelling.
Yeah. That's really interesting and an interesting perspective, because it's also really similar to kind of how we got into it, in that we realized there was going to be a need for, like, everyone's starting to create 3D. We need all these 3D assets. They're going to have to be optimized for these different channels, yada, yada, yada. And then we started talking to people, and then we realized, oh, wow, fashion's really producing a lot of these assets, and there's a lot of good use cases for them. But it was kind of the same sort of thing where wasn't really even on our radars when we first started building the product that we have today. And now it's become, so our core customer base. So I just think, and I think that you're going to see, I think that's a lot of the other founders that I talk to in this space. There's a similarity there. There's like people fall in love with the tech and like the idea of it, and then they find a market that might be able to solve for it. But then there's that big learning curve on our side of like, oh, we're outsiders. We don't really, how does this work? What do we need to understand? And now I find myself talking about collections and seasons and stuff like that.
Yeah. And what are the difference between brands? Like,
yeah, absolutely. Well, Sergey, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today. Everyone who's joining us, thanks so much for listening in. Happy holidays, everyone, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for having me. Goodbye.